I came across this video from Tim Pool's podcast or vlog, whatever you want to call it. It's a YouTube clip. And I wanted to talk about it because they talk about something that's been of concern for many of us in the field and for a while. And that is the field is moving towards activism as opposed to advocacy. So not just advocating for your client and helping your client advocate for their own rights and their needs, especially if there's someone who's been, you could say, beaten down by family members and friends and different people over the years, and they don't have the ability to speak up for themselves, or if they have some kind of service that they need access to, advocating for them in that way. But this is activism for a certain position, for a certain value system. We always talk in the field about valueless counseling, entering the counseling room and leaving your values at the door, which having a code of ethics is kind of impossible to leave any kind of value system at the door. And so there is advocacy within the field to not just help clients advocate for their rights, but to become an activist in their lives as their therapist for a certain position. Well, it's usually a political position, or it's something tied to politics, or something that they're looking for national change on. And so they're trying to do this person by person and within the field. If you go to many of the professional conferences, they feel more like activism events. It feels more like a protest with speakers than it does necessarily a conference. I want to talk about that just a little bit here. So let's go ahead and play. Try to go ahead.
Explicitly part of what a psychologist should do, according to Tama Bryant, our APA president. She put out a TED talk called "We Need to Decolonize Psychology," something like that. She says so she's a liberation psychologist, and liberation psychologists.
What is that?
So they view themselves.
By the way, I should note I haven't watched the whole thing. I just saw the topic and wanted to talk about it. I saw a shorter clip, so I'm not entirely sure what they're going to say here.
As political activists, therapy is a political act.
This sounds like Soviet era stuff.
Right, which is against the ethics code, if you ask me. Why would therapy be a political act? I'm not a psychologist, so this person is in a different part of the field. But this is just really interesting.
Mengele, Mao, Soviet, they all do the same thing.
They say that Melba Vasquez is another liberation psychologist. She's a past APA president. She says that it is our job as psychologists to awake the client to their own oppression and then help mobilize them into dismantling oppressive forces.
Also, like, the DSM-5 has a whole range of disorders, and one that I often use is either body integrity disorder or dysphoria, or pica, which...
Okay, so it's this idea that you're oppressed and you don't actually realize it, as opposed to enabling people to move forward in their lives, to find a healthier way of living, to advocate for themselves and their own rights, and those type of things. They're talking about trying to dismantle a system. This feels like political advocacy, as they said, within a field that's not supposed to be political in the first place.
You guys, what would happen if someone came in and they said, "No one will let me eat pennies, and I just want to, and I feel that I should be allowed to"? What do you have to say to them?
Well, you're the doctor, you're the psychologist, but I'll say from a training perspective, trained to affirm how difficult that must be, that you want to eat pennies and you're not able to, and people are oppressing your ability to do what you want with your body. So then we might move into exploring, like, oh, is that healthy or whatnot? But
what if they say yes? Like, what if they're like, yes, it is, and I can eat it, and it's fine?
So this is the conundrum for the field. It's like, how far do we take this? What is actually unhealthy? Is anything unhealthy? And I'm not making any political statements. I'm not making any statements about any particular diagnoses here. I'm just saying, how far will the field take this? It's really a question we have to answer at some point.
See, there's a teeny tiny truth in the very beginning there, which is, yes, it must be very difficult for you that you want this thing, that you cannot or should not do.
That used to be just alliance building. That used to be just how you built an alliance with a patient. That's all. And then go to the truth.
But where
you could, as a therapist, be like, "Wow, you're nuts.
But where the collusion begins when you start saying, It's so oppressive that people won't let you do that,
Right.
because that's where you're breaking from reality. The reality is it's not, the problem isn't that, quote, people won't let you. The reality is that it's really bad for you and all these other things. It's not a matter of a.
So the argument back at this then becomes, who gets to say what's bad for you and what's not? And this is what happens as like a Christian working at a Christian institution. Like, we have this foundation of biblical truth, and so we go by that, right? But the field with the ethics code that changes every number of years doesn't have any really firm foundation. And so these kind of things change, and people are unable, right, to understand the difference between right and wrong generally. And it becomes a struggle. So they come in and they say, no, this is right. And then you're supposed to just go along with that, even if they're hurting themselves significantly or are committing damage to themselves emotionally, physically, whatever you want to say, that's going to last for the rest of their lives.
Depression.
We are trained as clinicians just to ask questions, therapeutic wonderment. Wonder what that's about. Wonder why you do that, and let the patient come to their reality. Let them to kind of build the sense of what's going on there.
I know what we need. I'm going to open an unlicensed therapy clinic where it's just, look, you come in and you're saying something like, I'm having trouble socializing and it's painful every day I wake up. I'll say, well, for starters, you're morbidly obese and you smell bad. So perhaps you could stop eating, exercise.
Right. This doesn't really help either. Not in this way anyway. Just walk in and insult people. It's like the old Bob Hope Stop It thing. It doesn't really help either.
Take a shower and maybe people will listen. I'm not going to be an alliance. I'm going to tell you.
I actually got to that point at my practice in New York. I think it's actually why people were coming to me. Like, I had this huge wait list.
What? Okay, maybe I'm hearing this wrong, but it sounds like she's saying she's insulting people. They come in and I'm just telling you the flat out truth. People don't accept that very well typically. In session, you have to build the alliance, you have to build the relationship, and then slowly work your way into those harder things. At least that's been my experience.
I talk about it in the
Maybe
past
I'm wrong,
because I'm not practicing clinically right now. But I think people were so hungry for a therapist to just actually be real with them.
That I agree with. But what Tim was saying in the first place, it sounds like he's not a therapist. It sounds almost insulting.
To just say, look, again, as you said, well, you're, morbidly obese and you smell terrible. To be able to say, like, well, can we have real talk about what you think might be the barriers?
That's better. Okay, I take it back. That's better.
Between you and your goals, as opposed to saying it's so oppressive that there's.
Are you aware that people are afraid to come to therapists now because of these biases, and that there are organizations developing amongst professionals to try to support each other and being open and unbiased?
Yeah.
Chloe was telling me there's a good data that suggests people will not come get their mental health services because of fear of all this.
Shout out to Open Therapy Institute, actually, OTI, Andrew Hart's in New York. He's amazing. He started Open Therapy Institute. They're actually offering a training for me about the mental health benefits of free speech, because therapists and clients can go there if they want, like, basically just non-woke therapy.
Can you out crazy someone to make them realize why they're crazy? Like, if a guy came to you and said, I am a woman and I know I'm a woman, and then you were like, I know exactly what that's like. I'm a dragon. I'm a mythical dragon trapped in a human's body.
Okay, you can lose your license on this.
And every day I suffer. I know exactly what it must be like for you.
So there is actually, if you're dealing with somebody that has a very severe delusion, like if somebody comes and says, so the little green men are talking to me and it's driving me nuts. When they have a very severe psychotic disorder, it actually is helpful to avoid confronting it directly. At first, you might say things like, well, what did the little green men say? When did they first appear? What was going on in your life? So playing along for a deliberate, limited period of time for a therapeutic goal sometimes does matter, to your point.
Like Shutter Island.
I don't know.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Island. Sorry.
What's Shutter Island?
Wasn't it like he's on his island investigating something, and then the big reveal at the end is that he's actually a mental patient, and they're allowing him to perform his delusion to see where it goes.
Okay. Yeah. So there is a value in that to a certain degree, but when it becomes the whole thing, and then to Naomi's point, you start saying, well, isn't it oppressive that the people around you don't see that as well? you're making the patient worse.
That's exactly what I'm saying. How far do we let these things go? Are we breeding more mental illness?
You're deepening, you're colluding and reinforcing that delusion, as opposed to just exploring and probing the delusion so that you can think about how to help the person.
So, I mean, but is it psychosis if their brain is of standard working order,
No,
but they believe?
Well, I think that would just be a cognitive distortion, right? Because we believe things that are false on a lower level all the time. Oh, my husband doesn't really like me because he, left the dishes in the sink or whatever. But the problem is that in therapy, if I come to you and I say my husband doesn't like me because X, Y, Z, the therapist would presumably challenge the client. But when it is societal level conclusions, it is our job to then collude with the client in those delusions,
So,
as evidenced by
Well,
Cheney
when
Bryant.
NBC is broadcasting and saying, for example, allegedly, just not necessarily, but if the patient is hearing things on TV and then extrapolating and saying, well, the newsman said that it was adult laborers, but he blinked a certain way, so I knew it was really child laborers, then it's a psychosis on the patient's part. But when the news is feeding people misinformation, then
It's a really interesting topic. I'm sure there'll be more on this too as the field moves a certain direction. But I don't see this as just something within the counseling field. I see this in the church as well, the Christian church, where we're allowing ourselves to sit in immaturity and to grow. And then if anybody challenges that, we get upset about it. This is not specific to secularism and secular culture. This is the thing. Why don't people practice the spiritual disciplines in the church? Why don't counselors that are Christian use them in practice? Why don't we challenge people more? Why can't we handle it when people challenge us more? There's a lot of questions that need answered over time because there's something wrong with culture, but there's also something wrong with church culture. It's just really interesting to me. And so this kind of conversation is helpful to spurring that on, though I know it's definitely on one side of the political aisle. The points are interesting. Well, I hope this was helpful for new students and anybody else watching. It is an interesting conversation I'm sure we'll see more of.